Chair, 4 o'clock.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Delivery Committee meeting of the 15th of February 2023. Welcome. The days are getting longer, the evenings are getting shorter. It's quite nice to see, isn't it? Nice to see you all online and in the room. Can we crack on with agenda item number 1? Apologies for absence. Gareth?
Yes, from Jan Curtis and Bev Hopkins, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. Do we have any? We'll have some Monday, I'm sure. The third agenda item is minutes of the last meeting. Can I go through the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January, page by page, please? Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Are people who were present at that meeting happy for me to sign them as a correct record of the meeting?
Yes.
Lovely, thank you, Mike. Can we have a seconder? Do we strictly need a seconder?
Happy to second that.
Lovely, thank you very much, Sam. We do technically, don't we? Lovely, thank you very much. So the next agenda item is if I'm honest about it, an agenda item that I've been looking forward to since the beginning of the series of CDC meetings, and I've got to acknowledge the efforts of our friend and colleague. Oh, can we go to Helen? Helen, sorry, would you like to say something before I carry on, Helen?
Not before you carry on, no.
Oh, lovely, thank you. Yeah, to acknowledge the contribution of our friend and colleague, Councillor Fiona Gordon, and her chairing, her convening of the examination of the governing role, with her report a very challenging role. How can the council ensure that school governors provide effective challenge for their schools? And I've got to say, before I start, I don't know if I don't think you'll be able to see this, Fiona, but I've coloured in the report. There was so much interest here. There were so many important buttons pressed by this excellent scrutiny focus that I can't see the wood through the trees now, because it all seems important to me. And that takes me to a very important point, really. We're not here to replicate what this report says. We are to take key learning points forward. And on that point, I'll pass on now to Mr. Jeff Fish, who I think is going to take us through agenda item number 4, review of school governance.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just check with the director if she wanted to come in before me.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. I would like to come in before you by means of introduction, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, of course, Helen.
Thank you. So in terms of this being a fresh topic for the CDC, I think I'd like to reference really how important the education system is in Swansea in terms of it being underpinned by successful school leadership. So we know that we've got a successful system and we wish to maintain that system. So when we do speak about leadership in our schools, as part of our commitment to develop a policy around this, we really want to include governors as part of that leadership. So in measuring the success, I think we still need to maintain our focus on how leadership impacts on skills and progress of learners. And that was very much referenced in the inquiry report that you spoke about at the start of the meeting, in terms of that scrutiny inquiry on the challenging role of governors. So in developing a policy to strengthen and maintain the quality of leadership across our schools in Swansea, we really appreciate that those recommendations from that previous scrutiny report are very much live issues and still resonate with us today in the Education Directorate and across schools. But I think in hearing what Mr. Fish has to say in terms of governor support nowadays, I think we need to consider the collaborative advantage of governors learning from each other and learning from effective practice particularly. And the reception of good quality advice and guidance really is absolutely critical, especially these days, to continue to undertake their roles in a post-pandemic education landscape. So at a strategic level, I think governors have such an important part in securing positive outcomes for our learners across Swansea. But a lot has changed since the inquiry report, and I think the curriculum for Wales and ALN reform obviously form part of the new landscape for education. But that key focus on improving the learning, the well-being, the skills and progress of learners has never been as important as it is now. So I think, as this is one of 2 sessions for the CDC to look at maintaining successful school leadership in Swansea, I think by the end of the 2nd session, what we would hope to achieve is to have a steer from the committee on a particular aspect of school governance that requires fresh policy provision. Thank you, Chair.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Helen. And on that point, now I can pass on to Mr. Fish.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for already. But I'm going to repeat the reference to the work that was done by Councillor Gordon and the piece of work that was delivered to this committee now some 7 years ago. Where has the time gone? But for me, as a start point, it was a very valuable document to start from, to give me a sense check of where governance was at that point. Picking up on what Helen has said, there is a lot has changed, but the core values are still there. So some of those messages that came out from that inquiry report are still very much valid here today. They may have subtly changed in terms of their nuance or emphasis, but the core values are still there. So with your permission, Chair, I'll take you through the key highlights of the report to give it some focus, and happy to take any questions there.
Yes, please carry on.
So the purpose of the report really is to, one, have a backward glance as to what the inquiry report told us at the time. Are those messages still key? Is there a new focus around those messages? And also look at that at a point in time now, almost a sense check of where we are. So as is set out in the background, the reason that it was undertaken was recognition of the significant role that governors were playing in the delivery of the educational aspirations for the city, and obviously Pan Wales, and how the education department could meet those expectations and those needs. And as you've already referenced, Chair, as a consequence, a significant piece of work that came out under the stewardship of Councillor Gordon, but obviously there were a number of contributors to that, and as I said, that's really informed and helped my piece of work. The net effect of that, at its core, well, there were 16 recommendations set out in relation to that, and a number of actions flowing from that, which you'll see in relation to Annex A and Annex B of the original report. So what I was able to do on arrival was to use that as a framework. From my experience, see how much of that was still valid, and my opinion was that pretty much everything was still valid. They say some nuanced changes around there. Under item 2, I've just set out the response in relation to that the report was welcomed by the Chief Education Officer, as was at the time. I'm now the Director of Education, and that the actions that could be taken in relation to that. At 2.2, you'll see that I've made a comment here that significant early progress was made against a number of the recommendations. And importantly, and I think more significantly, these are now embedded as business as usual processes within. And I've drawn out 2 to give you a sense of that. The first being around effective recruitment and using an effective skills matrix to recruit local authority governors. Now, as somebody who's new to sitting on that local authority panel and that selection process, I've seen firsthand how effective that is. And then secondly there, what was picked up during the inquiry report was about the training needs of governors, ensuring that that's fit for purpose and making it more accessible. That's certainly the case, and a positive impact, and then there are some positive impacts out of the pandemic that only further accelerated that in terms of an online provision.
Can I jump in very quickly, Jeff, just to say that this was a point picked up by Councillor Bev Hopkins in our last CDC meeting, that the governor training arrangements have been significantly improved over time, which was really heartening, and I think agreed with by other councillors who were in that meeting then. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. And as I say, I'm I'm loath to use statistics completely, but what the statistics do show, just at a very basic and raw level, is actual attendance at training has vastly improved because the flexibility in the offer of the training has improved. Now, there may be some quality issues about training online as in person. There are some subtle differences in that. And I think that's one of the things I would like us to have a look at going forward, that there needs to probably be a blended training offer come back in rather than a whole online offer. But yeah, absolutely, it was a positive that arose out of that. So on to section 3 there, to give you a sense that I've tried to capture since my arrival into this post. Now, over the page, I'll reference when my arrival came about as such, was to really bring to committee this evening where I and the directors, where we've had many conversations around this, and the cabinet member, in terms of where I felt we were in terms of governance in Swansea and where we were as an education department in supporting that. But I think the first thing really to reference, I've mentioned already that it's 7 years since the publication of this report. To say there's been unprecedented change in that period is a vast understatement. For an area of work across the authority that is used to change in education, the pace and variety and significance of that change in the preceding 7 years has been huge. And I've just referenced some of the examples which you'll be familiar with there. I'm sure many of you are school governors. The introduction of curriculum for Wales. It's arguable we are at the start of that journey. It was implemented from September, but there's been a 2-year lead into that. It's an ongoing process. Obviously, the introduction of the ALN Act, and then obviously we've almost lost sight of that. We started school categorisation within that 7-year time frame, and now we've stopped school categorisation within that time frame. So a lot of, and I've only given you some of the real big headlines there. As you know, at a macro level, there's much more going on. Just to give you some regional sense then at 3.2, and the reason I've highlighted this at 3.2 and 3.3 is these were identified as particular actions and recommendations from the prior report in terms of working with these agencies. I've referenced that in this time frame there has been changes. So ERU, as you're aware, which was the regional partnership, is no longer and has been replaced by Partneriaeth. And then at 3.3, Governors Wales, which at the point of the commission of the publication of the report was government funded, and that funding was withdrawn and is now a private sector provision. I'm still doing sterling work, and I've worked with Jane and Sam since they've converted to Governors Cymru, but again, slightly different focus in relation to there. 3.4 is a little backward glance again, recognition about the important role. And my observation is that probably even greater so, the need for governors to respond to change at pace has exponentially increased in that time. And I think it's really important to capture that. It's not as if governance has stood still and we're trying to do the same things we do 7 years better. There's been a lot more demand placed on governors. And it's one of the things I share with the director quite often. I'm a chair of governors myself. So I've sort of turned poacher turned gamekeeper, but I do have an eye on it from both sides, and those are real pressures that governors are under. It is important, and again, to capture this significantly for governors in Swansea, is the adaptability that they demonstrated during the pandemic. To say to governors overnight, you still have statutory functions, move all your functions online and still perform, it was a huge achievement, absolutely huge achievement. I just wanted to put that on record there. And I think what's important there is it's a huge pat on the back for governors that sometimes they self-doubt their own ability. Well, they were able to do that, and I think we need to use that positivity going forward and encourage them to be progressive. Despite all those, so just reference 3.6 now, despite all of the change, despite the pressures during the pandemic, what I am seeing is still significant examples of excellent practice. And I'm not going to reference those, but they are starting to come through from some of the Estin inspections. where the commentary is coming through on excellent governance still there. And I'll talk about the challenge and support role in a moment, but that's where I see it, but that's where I get a sense of it from an independent perspective as well. But I have recognised in there, you'll see in the second sentence in 3.6, however, there are some examples where better initial support for governors would improve their role in challenging and supporting schools. And I think that's what this committee really need to look at is where's that need and how do we meet that need. As part of meeting that need is referenced in 3.7 and over the page then and a 3.8 was the director and the cabinet members' recognition that we needed to have a look at a focus and a capacity around governance. So I was brought into this role in October 22. I think there's 2 members online who are aware of my prior existence. So I worked with the authority for 20 years prior to that, and I was the corporate fraud manager. It seems an odd move to make at my point in life, and I've been a criminal investigator for some 37 years in local government. My background, however, because I wasn't busy enough in the day job, Chair, was I've been significantly involved in governance for about 25 years in South East Wales. So I was involved at an operational level, but also at a strategic level in terms of scrutiny, etc. I also currently work for Central South Consortium as a regional leader of governance. So what we felt, I hope this was the selection process they gave me the job, that I could bring a unique set of skills. As I said, it is this poacher turned gamekeeper analogy. So one of the things that the director made clear right from the offset, there's no bedding in period, Chair, was that we needed to get a state of the nation check on where we were. So what I sought to do through the Governor Support Unit, which was significantly embedded, was a reflective exercise as where we were, engage with stakeholders to get a sense of that. And at an operational level, it hasn't all been strategic. At an operational level, I've had significant exposure to leadership and governance. So that has really informed as well where those positives and where possibly there are some weaknesses as well. So that's been really handy to capture that. One of the things that we shared very early on, I think probably 2 weeks into the post in October, we had the termly meeting with chairs of governance, and it picks up on one of the themes that probably is a residual from the original inquiry report, is this pool of excellence. How do we construct that pool of excellence and then share that pool of excellence effectively so that new or inexperienced governors have somewhere to go to within themselves? It's about building their own resilience and capacity as well. We'll obviously support that in any which way we can, but quite also self-help is good as well. So that's something that we put out there. In actual fact, it was positive to have responses from experienced governors who were prepared to work with the authority in delivering that. I sit alongside my colleague Sarah, who's far more technologically savvy than me. But again, in 7 years, the solutions that we have available are far greater than they were in terms of supporting some of those needs. And that's something that we want to look at. We've developed, again, members would probably be unaware of that, but we've developed internally a data capture system called our WineWeb. This is our governor support function. So we've moved a lot of our, shall I say, old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet functions into a bespoke product that we've developed internally ourselves. It's working well, but there are many opportunities to enhance that and develop that further. One of the things that we're contemplating, and maybe something the members want to have a look at, is that may be available as a self-serve tool for governors to support their training needs, etc. And importantly, 3.12, where I bring that all together, what the director's done in making, not me, but creating this position, this post, is ensure that the focus will remain. I'm satisfied it was always there anyway, but the fact that it's now dedicated to one position, one post, will give it an absolute sharpness. So with your permission, Chair, if I just highlight some of the conclusions that members may wish to consider, is I think whilst, as we said, it's not a hugely reflective exercise, as in a line by line, but there may be some scope in having a look at the original recommendations, see that they are appropriate and fit. It's my observation that they are ostensibly are. As I said, there's some operational issues that have changed around ERU and Governors Wales, but probably they do need re-emphasising. If they are the same, they need re-emphasising and sharing with governors. At 4.2 there, I think we can possibly extend that. And again, the director's highlighted this, is that we can explain how challenge and support, the key tenets of governance, fit into the corporate priorities of ensuring that leadership delivers learner progress. So I think that message can be shared out there. 4.3 it is a significant one. This is around the school improvement guidance. There is now a new role for governors, and accountability is a huge emphasis for them there, and that's something that possibly we need to be developing alongside our school improvement partners. And in actual fact, there's been early dialogue around that. And all of that, if that works, is back to this self-serve principle I mentioned earlier, will hopefully give governing bodies confidence in their own resilience, and in doing so, they're then prepared and happy to share their own experience, their own resilience with others, so that they self-build this together. I'll pause there, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. So can I ask members of the committee for any questions, please? Before I see the hands going up, can I add a few comments for myself? In my day job, I teach governance at the university, and I've just taken a module on corporate governance in policing for senior police officers. Very interesting area, and there's a couple of preliminary comments that I think the committee should consider as we go forward. And we're not here to cheerlead and to be unnecessarily cosy in saying how great our governing bodies are, and they are. Absolutely, we wouldn't be anywhere with them, but we do have to take a realistic and practical perspective of what excellence is, and go down from there. So we realise that if not everyone is excellent, how do we get up to speed? I think that the mysterious question of why governors do it remains, because it is an arduous blinking time. I'm looking at a chair of governors for 20 years there as well. I'd say this, but it is an arduous task, and sometimes the technical, the financial management, the employment law, business skills that are demanded, if I'm honest, fill me with horror, because it is so challenging. So how do we ease the pain? And you've touched upon some areas that we could take the pressure off there. Being led by excellence, establishing a pool of excellence is interesting, really fascinates me. And making sure we use people with the right skills, knowledge, experience, and qualifications where required, whatever that might mean for us. Whether it means that we look at encouraging ramped up training for those roles. Conscious in saying this with Helen and the entire officer team, that I'm not thinking about overburdening the overburdened. For me, this is taking things off and replacing with new, not adding more. I think there's fundamentals that I'd like to see as we go forward, committee. I don't know if you agree with this, but in Fiona's introduction, Councillor Gordon's introduction to the report, I think she referred to the number of governors that we had in Swansea schools at the time, 1,300 school governors in Swansea. So some sort of practical statistical information about how many we've got and where the skills, where the gaps are, where we struggle more to get governors. But I'd like to see as well some key information about the governing bodies, statutory purpose and structure, voluntary roles or paid specialist roles. What are we talking about as we go forward? Governing bodies for every single school, or can we consider meeting the statutory challenge at a cluster level? Does this mean that we might have fewer people sitting around fewer tables? They are questions. Last time I mentioned myself as a squeaky hinge. I think we've got to be at this sort of in this forum, asking the questions and getting the answers. How does the role of the governing body balance to the role of the CEO, if I'm thinking correctly in corporate terms? The head of the paid service, the head teacher. So the balance between the governing body and the head role. And then when we look beyond that, then we need to be mindful of the role of the Education Directorate in supporting schools. Swansea Governors Wales is gone, but any other outside bodies, Partneriaeth, for example, and how we link all of these different roles together in a meaningful way, which benefits the school in the best way, in the most efficient and effective way that we can. So those are preliminary comments for me. I call some of them squeaky hinge comments and saying, well, we do it this way for a purpose. Some of those purposes are set by law, but what scope for real change have we got? And if we can really be, dare I say, radical in how we change things for the better, what might radical look like as well? Can I ask Helen Morgan-Rees to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just in response to some of those fundamentals, as you described them, in terms of asking for data and information on the numbers of governors we have, I think we have to be mindful really of in asking for that information, what do we hope to do with it in terms of policy provision? So that's one question. Another one then is consideration around the formal agreement that's been established recently on regional working. Governance is not a function of the new Partneriaeth. So that legal agreement was agreed in our cabinet in Swansea not so long ago. So the formality around that would be a long way away in terms of changing that legal agreement once again. However, I would say that formal, discussions at a regional level could happen, but it's certainly not a function. That function in terms of governor support firmly sits within Swansea Local Authority. On the matter of a cluster governance arrangements, I think current regulations would prevent us. I don't know if we've got legal advice in the room this afternoon. I can't see, but I think it's something that we would have to change the law on potentially. So that would be very difficult to achieve in terms of the medium term. But in setting out fresh policy provision in the short term, I think some of the points you alluded to there, Chair, are very helpful, but we need to focus our thoughts because we only have one more session with this committee.
Lovely, thank you, Helen. I think that, of course, legal advice is very important. My point is that I've sat in governing bodies for 20 years and I've been on committees that I've never met. And I'm just there. I'm a name against the committee on it. It's completely worthless and pointless. Why do it in the first place? If there's no function to fulfill, why do we have them? So it's those questions I'm asking now. What do we need to have? Where do we need to have it? And if we can streamline our support services with a focus on pools of excellence, learning from good practice, well, that's the policy direction that we'll end up going in a meaningful way, which has practical impact on the schools as we look ahead. Robert Francis, Councillor Robert Smith, sorry.
I'm not Robert Francis Davis. I know where you got that impression.
Three Roberts occurred to me when I think
Yeah,
of Swansea Council.
There's too many Robs in this council, yeah. No, can I just echo the thanks to Councillor Fiona Gordon for the report that she produced, because I think that fulfills a very useful function of a scrutiny function, looking backwards and taking stock of where we are. And I think that's a firm foundation for this committee. Our job, or your job here as a CDC, is to take that evidence and consider where do we move from here. And I think that's going to be crucial. The director has already mentioned some of the things that we can't do. That's not to say, of course, that we won't be able to do them at some point, but that's an argument and a discussion for other places. And I think that there were questions raised. Believe it or not, I'm old enough to remember when LMS came in and there was an insistence that every school had its own governing body. That's how sad I am, and that's how sad a life I've led. That I was taking an interest in these things back then. That meant that arrangements that had operated very successfully, especially, for instance, for junior and infant schools, they needed their own governing bodies, whereas they've been jointly held before. And I think, those are issues, as I said, for a separate discussion. What I think is crucial here, and as Jeff alluded to, what are we doing as a council to make sure that our governing bodies are working effectively? What are we doing to step in when there are issues? But above all, what are we doing to prevent those issues happening in the first place by making sure that these volunteers, these valuable volunteers we have, are given the support and the training they need to enable them to fulfill their functions? And I think those are going to be the crucial questions, or some of the crucial questions for the committee moving forward.
Thank you, Robert. I do absolutely agree with you. I think that we've got a question, a hand up there by Councillor Lyndon Jones online. Lyndon?
Thank you, Chair. Could I say to Fiona as well, a really excellent report. And I have to say, she hasn't changed at all when I'm looking at the picture on page 1. But no, a really excellent report. And one of the things that we could look at is, updating some of those recommendations as was suggested, and where they need changing. I think one of the key things is to get the proper skills matrix for a governing body, so that we've got people on that body with the right skills, covering all aspects of what that particular school needs. And I think where a governing body can get the people and have that local interest, I think it's good to have a local governing body. But where the school may be smaller, then maybe not on a cluster level, but a number of schools could get together to have one governing body. And a way, I don't know if it could be done, where you could probably appoint the same governors to different schools, to 2 schools possibly. So that might be a way of getting that to happen sooner. I don't know, but certainly where schools have got that interest and they've got that level of local people, then I think that local knowledge is important. Okay, but as I say, I think it really is not one fix for all, because you could be doing different things in different areas to suit different schools. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Lyndon. It's very good points that you make there. I think using the skills matrix and identifying skills, knowledge, experience and qualifications that can be put to good use, doing that in an organised, systematic way, is meaningful, rather than individual schools doing it and then not having anyone in the school to be able to go through the skills audit to see who's got what skills, knowledge, experience and qualifications to be put to good use, perhaps. As a question mark, really.
Yeah, I mean that
go on, Robert.
The skills matrix obviously forms part of the of our own system for appointing local authority governors, where we would work with the schools on the using a skills matrix. So I think that that we've got the basis there, and whether that needs to be rolled out more broadly. But certainly, as far as our own appointments are concerned, that's a crucial part.
Could you put the microphone off a sec? Yeah, great. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I wasn't thinking along those lines then. So then we got central control of being able to see who's got what skills, where those skills are, and then we can sort of have a role in identifying the gaps, the skills gaps that we've got. Jeff, do you want to say?
Yeah, Chair, possibly. If a couple of points that have been mentioned there by members, so I'll come back on a few of them. But the skills matrix, when there, yes, as the cabinet members just confirmed, it's very much embedded within the LA process. My exposure at the moment would say that it's not uniform across schools. So in some schools, it is being used very effectively. So when vacancies do arrive, they have a look at that skills matrix to see, well, we have a vacancy at a parent level or a community level. There's a particular skill set that we have. However, at the moment, the way in which governance is regulated, they can't be used as reasons to preclude somebody from coming on. So obviously the parent process is very open. It's a nomination and ballot process decided upon by parents as such. So it's very difficult to use the skills matrix. And just give an example in that particular setting. It was just mentioned now in relation to using governors at more than one school. Currently, the regulations do allow for that. a governor. I'm sure there's governors, again, members who are governors on more than one school here. At the moment, that restriction is at 2. But again, there could be scope for people to come across for a skill. They may well sit on one, but again allows for whether there's vacancies. Obviously, under certain circumstances, the director does have powers to appoint additional governors to bring support into a school. So there's another medium by which to do that. Picking up on one of your earlier comments, Chair, around how much flexibility is there around the construct of governing bodies and putting professional people in professional places. You may or may not be aware, a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, so I'm probably going back about 5 years ago, the Welsh Government commissioned a large piece of work to review governance models. I was extensively involved in that piece of work on a number of levels. It ultimately fell in the too difficult to do pile at Welsh Government level, primarily because a lot of governors, that there was a huge mixed response. A lot of governors were very welcome to that we need, this, and it was exactly the model you set there, Chair, that, that we were almost professionalising governance because of that skill set need. So a number of governing bodies across Wales and regionally were accepting that model. But in some regions, there was a lot of resistance to that and say, everything's fine, leave us alone. Let us get on with it. So paraphrasing, it became too difficult to do, but I think it just became too difficult to unpick. One thing there is scope in terms of, again, is there are certain circumstances under which federated models can happen. At the moment, it's quite restrictive, so probably doesn't afford us the flexibility in relation to that. I'm just glancing at my notes there, Chair, whether there was anything else from earlier points, and I've covered those.
Lovely, thank you very much. Accountability, you referred to at 4.3, members may wish to develop and promote the new accountability responsible on governors in the new school improvement model currently being piloted. Does this ramp up the role even greater in levels of accountability and responsibility than what it is at the moment?
Yes, it does. Yeah, brings a much sharper focus on accountability. So a lot of the other duties we do, their statutory requirements, their functions, etc. But the actual accountability for school improvement itself and outcomes is acutely sharpened around a governance.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Fish? No hands up.
Can I just ask a quick question, Chair?
Yeah, you can, Fiona. I was just, if nobody else put their hand up, I was going to ask if you wanted to comment, because if you mentioned more times than I've ever heard any single councillor being mentioned in a meeting here. Fiona, please carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just strange to think how long ago that is, but yeah, absolutely. What's been mentioned is how much change has gone on. As you say, it's an unusual amount, and schools have responded and governors have responded incredibly. It's a little bit about getting the balance, isn't it, between making the job or the role seem attractive enough for people to want to come forward. However, it's become even more laden with responsibility and duty. And I know, working in the field of ALN, it's huge responsibilities on school governors to make really important decisions that they might not feel as if they have the skills and the experience to carry out. It's great to hear about Mr. Fish's role and to sort of have that coordinating sort of function within the authority, and I think that sort of shows the status that the department places on governance. Can I just check then? So I think something that came out of our looking at the way the system was that in some areas there were real strengths, and then some areas there was a need for more support, and that would probably be somewhere in line with levels of deprivation and so on, and social issues more generally. So are schools able to come to you, Mr. Fish, and to ask for support, and do you broker that support and encourage them to network with other governing bodies, almost buddy up, to get that support? Because I'm just wondering how yeah, how much governing bodies feel that they can reach out to others and for support and so on. And is that some part of your role then?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Mr. Fish?
They certainly do come to me and to us. As I say, it's been a baptism of fire in relation to that. And as I said, an operational level, that did give me a sense of some of the need that was there, but also some of the excellence as well. So absolutely, they can and they do come to us for support. There's a number of ways in which we provide that report. It could be bespoke support around training, etc. Probably a more significant level that you're referring to is where there is a capacity issue. And they've recognised themselves that they need additional support. So yes, we have started. And prior to my arrival, we would put in additional support that we would broker. And certainly since my arrival, we've done that and added in. And again, there's vehicles by which you can do that. You can do that at a soft level. That there's vacancies, and we'll assist them in identifying people, whether that's through the LA vacancy role or elsewhere. But significantly as well within with our approval or with the director's approval, they can adjust their instrument of governance itself to actually increase their capacity, and that gives us a direct ability to influence and put in additional support, which we've done in a number of examples. Going forward, yeah, I probably, in the short term, I want to make that support better, more visible, and over time, through the other strategies that we develop, in theory, that need should diminish because the resilience will then be built up in the meantime.
Thank you.
Could I just ask before calling somebody else in then? So are we saying that over time then that we'd have a sense of growing our own, excuse me, growing our own expertise and thereby developing our resilience and strength in depth?
That's certainly my aspiration, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to achieve that.
No, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Can I go next to Councillor Sam Pritchard, please?
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Can everyone hear me? I was in
yes, we could hear you without your microphone on, probably. Sam, carry on, please.
There we go. I was in a prior meeting, so I haven't had time to get fully home. So I'm using my phone. But thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to comment and say I think we have had a huge difference from even when I was a councillor first elected in 2017. The appointment process of back then, the appointment of governors was done via a committee, which would normally meet for a maximum. I think the longest meeting we ever had was about 5 minutes. And so I think the new system of appointing school governors, particularly from the local authority side, has been really effective in better managing skills and better, matching people up to schools where there is a need for a particular skill. And so I just wanted to highlight that the system is currently better. The other thing I would address is that there is a really big and really long list of governors training, which I know there are some which are compulsory and some which are optional. But I do want to commend the local authority for the varied nature of training. I think the provision of training that we offer is really quite helpful and really quite good. And I know a number of school governors, myself included, have benefited from the training that is on offer. So I would just commend that work. The other thing I'd say as a school governor is what I've often experienced is some of the things that we face clearly cannot be dealt fully internally by the school, particularly on matters which relate to HR matters and as a chair or governor, staff disciplinaries and pupil permanent exclusions. Those really difficult things are not easy for governors to make. However, the support from the local authority is one, essential, and two, in my experience, has been incredibly helpful for me as a chair or governor. And I think part of what I'm rambling about is simply this: in terms of people coming forward to governors, I think my view is that a lot of people have the skill or the ability to be a school governor, but not the confidence that they have the right skills or abilities. And I think the support that is available, I'm just wondering whether or not that needs to be more well advertised amongst people who aren't yet governors. Those who might be considering, those who might be thinking about being governors, might not realise the breadth and width of training that already exists. Because I know when I put my name forward to be a school governor, I don't think I knew how much support I would receive in finance issues, in HR issues, in disciplinary issues. And so that's a compliment in one sense, that there is more resource there to support governors to be better in terms of their governance of the school. But my question is in terms of attracting new governors, and I know there are always a number of vacancies in, on the list of local authority governors. We always need more people to come forward. I just wonder whether if we better promoted the good work that is already there, we might have more people feeling confident enough to put their names forward, because it is a rewarding job. It is a lot of work. It is voluntary, but it is really encouraging when you see the fruit of your work and the benefit it has on pupils. And so the more people we can encourage to come forward, the better. But I just think whether we advertise further, that would have a positive impact in more people coming forward.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Sam. And please don't apologise for your insight. That's really very much appreciated by everyone, I'm sure. Can I ask Helen Morgan-Rees, please?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't particularly want to respond to Councillor Pritchard's remarks, but I'm grateful for the positivity and the thinking behind that. I think there's some really good thought behind the need to lay it all out really for governors in terms of recruitment, the pitfalls, the good and the bad, and also expose the amount of training and the depth and breadth of that training that's available. So thank you for those comments. In terms of the report in front of you today, I think there are 4 conclusions within that report. It would be really helpful for officers who have spent quite a lot of time in compiling today's report, in getting a steer from the committee in terms of what you would like to develop next. I'm just thinking that there could be something from those 4 conclusions that you would really wish to focus on, because we only have one more meeting and then we'll have to go away and think about the policy as a product really of this committee. So we haven't got the luxury of time of exploring all avenues. So I think the more focus we can have, the more steer from the committee, the better, please.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Robert-Smith?
Yeah, and I'd echo that. And I think in formulating those, the way forward, what the committee needs to bear in mind is, and it's something that Sam Pritchard was clear about, when we're talking about governing bodies, let's be clear as well about what exactly we're asking governors to do. Because yes, we have a HR department. We're not asking them to be HR professionals. We're not asking them to be legal professionals. And above all, we're not asking them to run a school on a day-to-day basis. That is the responsibility of the head teacher and the leadership team in the school. And I think that's a crucial difference here, that we don't get those lines blurred, because when those lines get blurred, we're in a potentially difficult position. And some of us have had experience of that in schools where we've been governors, where at times the role of the governors and the role of the head teacher can get blurred, and that's it's a recipe for disaster, to be honest. So we need to be clear then in supporting governors, that we're clear that we're supporting them to address the specific duties and the specific roles which they have, and that those are important roles, but they're not. Let's not make them responsible or make them think they're responsible for areas which they're not.
Thank you very much, Robert. Some of the notes that I made here, again, I'm going back to this in my thinking about this business versus education role. You know, they're not there to be specialist educators. They're not there for professional qualifications in education, qualified teacher status, or anything like it. There is a distinct role. So relating to what Sam said about the idea of advertising the roles, the idea of promoting the governing roles, the idea of describing clearly what, in terms of a job description and person specification, what kind of people are we looking for, opening up the debate about who we would like to join, to apply, to get involved, through promotions, advertising, social media, maybe developing a shadowing system so people can come along and observe governing bodies. And I can't help myself going towards HE links, teacher training, university students, not just in education, but in business as well. So people are going through they're learning about governance, they're learning about strategic management, they're learning about scrutiny and all these things. So, have we got an untapped pool of people to be attracted into this, as everyone says, incredibly vital and rewarding role, but thankless often and blinking hard work. So I can't see any hands up in the room now. I can't see any hands up on the screen there. So let's turn to Helen's comment about considering the 4.1 on 4.1 to 4.4, the conclusion comments of Mr. Fisher's report, and to think about the original conclusions from Fiona Gordon's scrutiny report. Do we have any comments here? My comments are that these seem very live to me. I will struggle to filter them down. Really, I can see Councillor Joy nodding her head there. So can I ask committee members for their insights, please? How do we feel about this? I think that it's important that we acknowledge and celebrate the work of school governors, that governors are clear about what their role means in practice, as Councillor Smith says, absolutely vital, backed up by what Sam said earlier. General information and advice for school governors being consistent and easy to access. I don't know if that relates to the improvements we've seen in the training context as well, which is markedly improved there. Understand information that governors receive from the school. Sometimes you can be overwhelmed by the information. I had an email the other day. There was about 10 reports attached to this email. How many hundreds of pages? I don't know. I encourage school governors to seek information about the school beyond the head teacher reports. Managing their own learning, individual governors to manage their own learning and development, support governing bodies to manage their own learning and development, as Mr. Fish touched upon there, which I think is a critical area, using modern tech to be able to do so, encouraging the involvement of the whole governing body in school improvement work. Encouraging the involvement. I would need clarity about what the role of the governors, as you said, Robert, what the role of the governors is, not as professional educators, how the governors add value to that process. Work with governing bodies to fill their skills gap, again linked to training, and promoting the governor role to the private sector and beyond. My comment here is big business. In Fiona's report, we saw the CBI mentioned, we saw business skills, to look into the private sector to see if we can encourage more people with those skills to come into our environment, sharing good practice through the local authority appointed governors. So bringing governing bodies together. The other comment I wrote down here was the governor's carousel. It's a funny way to put it, maybe, but could we have, look, let's turn it round. So I might be attached to Gendros Primary now, but then maybe I'll be almost informally seconded onto other governors to see how things work in different schools, so you can spread that gospel in that horizontal interweaving sort of way. Work with head teachers to ensure a culture of challenge in meetings, and the challenge and support issue here, I think, is a key one that we need to be focus on. What do we mean by challenging? What do we mean by supporting? We don't want to be overbearingly challenging of our head teachers, but we need to challenge intelligently. So that would be key. And to identify the support arrangement, the right for the school. So those 13 recommendations, then we've got long-term challenges, medium-term improvements. I'm struggling to really finesse them further myself. Any comments, committee members? Go on, Lyndon. Councillor Jones. You're on mute, Lyndon.
Chair, I'd agree. It is difficult to differentiate, but I think it's worth us updating those and for them to be part of the mix.
Sorry, Lyndon, I thought you froze then. I got your point, that we move them forward. So is this a positive thing for you, Mr. Fish, for Helen, Morgan Rees in particular? Are we being as helpful as we could be as a committee? I think what we are hearing resoundingly is that this report, written quite a long time ago now, remains live despite the huge challenges that we've had. My opening comments that I read penned it because there was so much meat in it. So would it be acceptable for the committee if we said to Mr. Fish that you've got our support to finesse them, to go through them and to see where the improvements you've reported on are in connection with the conclusions, and then maybe to combine some of them into a tighter list of key areas? Would that be reasonable? Councillor Sam Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to come in terms of clarity, in terms of what we're being asked to do. If you know, my understanding was that are we meant to be looking at the 4 conclusions, given how few meetings we've got left? Are we meant to be choosing which areas from the 4 conclusions we think are key? Because I am quite conscious of how few meetings we've got left, and the breadth of work that could potentially be undertaken is massive. So I suppose if Helen could provide some clarity on how we as a committee can best serve the interests of the officers, because otherwise I'm sure officers could spend years on this.
Thank you, Sam. I agree with you. I think that 4.1 says members may wish to consider which of the original recommendations remain appropriate and fit for purpose, any new areas to focus on. So we've had comments about some of the new areas. We've had lots of comments about the meat of the report, as was previously, and the idea would be for us to distill them into key areas for us to focus on as we move forward from this point. I think, Helen?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Councillor Pritchard, for asking for that clarity. I think we need to focus not on what serves the best interests of officers, but what will ultimately strengthen governance in Swansea. And I think
Sorry, Helen, can I just butt in quickly? I think Sam was being kind. I think he was trying to sort of say that we don't want to overburden an overburdened team. I think that's what I heard from Sam.
No, I don't doubt that. So in terms of the ask specifically, from the 4 conclusions of today's report, I mean, the first one makes reference to the inquiry that was held by scrutiny. And although it's live and it resonates now, there are elements within that list of 16 recommendations, I think there are in totality, that we could get more yield if we developed policy around some of them. So I think by the next meeting, it may be helpful to the committee and to Mr. Fish to maybe focus on the few that need further traction and development, and to consider what policy we could wrap around those recommendations in order to strengthen and ensure that they are implemented in full. Because the success in meeting a number of those recommendations has clearly been articulated this afternoon, but I think there are some of them that probably need a little bit more work, and in doing so, a policy to support that work would be really helpful.
Yes,
I reiterate that because I was going to come in and Helen has said it. We don't want to repeat what was in the scrutiny report. What we need to focus on is what are the key areas within that report that we need to take forward, and how can we take forward, and what do we need to put in place to enable, and that's the key, what needs to be put in place to enable that to be realized.
Do we have clearer parameters for Mr. Fish's focus now? I think that we're saying that we understand the value of that live report. We can see the great work that's carried on, and Mr. Fish in his report has indicated key areas to be focused on as we go forward from now. So it seems to me that the committee is endorsing what you've said, thanking you for your efforts, Mr. Fish, very importantly, and saying that you've got our support to take the next steps in this very important policy direction. Does that make sense?
And that we then ask Mr. Fish to come back to the next meeting with those issues with a bit more meat on the bones.
Yes. Committee colleagues.
for the committee to approve or change it depending on its view.
Yes, absolutely. Committee, are we content with that? Do we think this is a yes? Thank you, Lyndon. Committee members, Councillor Joy, good way forward. Councillor White, yes, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay, well, I think we've got a unanimous level of support in this, and I've got to move on from the report now. Nobody is indicating that they want to say anything else. So can I again thank you for this work, Mr. Fisher. It is really very much appreciated. Now, you alluded to colleagues earlier. I know we're not on our own, so we're not saying it to you, it's a team and all that, but you have led on this with support from more tech-savvy colleagues and others, as you said earlier. But it's very much appreciated. It's a crucially important area for the local authority. And for me, as we go forward, we're not here to overburden the overburdened. You know, I don't want anybody to think that's in anybody's mindset here. It's about taking the pressure off and becoming more efficient over time. And the idea of growing our own there's real importance there, I think. Okay, so if we move forward to agenda item number 5, which is the work plan. Can you believe that we are where we are already? It is the 15th of February and we are heading towards the next meeting on the 22nd of March 2023, which again, as we said earlier, strengthened and effective school governance, where we will reconvene and look at those key areas. Do we have any concluding comments? I can't see anybody's hands up or anything. Nothing to add here. We are a content committee. Wow. Can I thank you all very much for your insights? I did enjoy that meeting. There was so much meat in there. I was a bit concerned about it beforehand, to be honest, you know, because there's a lot of information that we've gone through and your insights are, as ever, very much valued. Thank you all. And on that point, I'll close this meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank